Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I am Julie with Paisleys and Polka Dots, and in this video I am going to show you how I paint and a few techniques that I used to paint and put together our farmhouse. I guess you want to call it maybe a barn door. I actually don't have a barn door to show you because I designed it for one of the cross-stitch designers, and I sent my only piece that I have made off to her. So I'm going to recreate it with you in this video, and you'll see it all finished when we get all done. And there's a few different techniques I used for this barn door, so I thought it would be very helpful to all of you if I showed you how I did it. So I'm going to jump right in and get started. This is the frame around the door, and this is the back side of the door. It actually goes this way, but I already went ahead and I painted some of the pieces just to shorten the video a bit. These pieces here are some of the pieces. These are the cross bars for the door, and this is part of the shelf. The door does have a shelf on it, and that's going to go right here. So I went ahead and I put one coat of paint on these smaller pieces just for time-saving purposes. Now a few, and I used the Deco Art Americana paint. I just put one coat of this raw umber, this is the color that I used, onto the wood with, I used this paintbrush here, and just quickly slapped a coat of paint on. I did go over the edges just to kind of protect them with paint, but you don't have to since it's about the same color, but I did paint my edges. So, and I'm going to paint this one frame piece here just to show you how I did it. Now, one of the things that I want to let you know is these pieces do have to fit together. So, of course, you know, this piece here is going to fit in the slots of the frame here. So you want to try and not get any paint into your slots. These slots here, or this area here, like I didn't paint this area. I didn't even paint this section right here because this is going to cover it up. So I just left that open. It didn't need to get painted. So, but if you do get paint in your little slots here, you can take a nail file, such as, you know, an emery board, just like you file your fingernails, and you can sand the slots in order to get any of the paint out that you might need. So you can sand that like that, and it'll help you fit your pieces back in. Even sometimes the wood can swell with the paint because moisture's in the paint and those types of things. Also, sometimes you might have, because it fits differently if you put something in from the front versus the back. So sometimes if pieces don't fit together just right, try flipping it over to the back side and fitting them in again. Like these little pieces, these are the braces. So they do fit a little bit differently from the front to the back. So if you have a problem with that, you can try flipping it over as well. But usually there are no problems. I'm just giving you some little tricks of the trade just to just in case that happens to you or you have too much paint involved. So like I said, I'm going to get started, and I'm going to paint this top piece right here first. So I am using, and I'm going to set this one aside. This is the background of the barn frame. I don't know if it's a barn door. It kind of looks like a barn door, I guess. Yeah. And I'm just going to use my little, just a paper plate to put my paint on here. I'll probably need more paint than that. And I'm going to go around the outside edges first. Like I said, you don't really have to put a coat of paint on the outside edges, and you don't have to be real particular with your painting on this because it's going to be really covered. Now the top part of the frame is it's white. It's kind of like an off-white. So you want your darkest color underneath, because once we get this aged frame look going, I'm going to show you the techniques I use to make it look old and dingy and worn out. And we're going to be using salt to do that. So this top coat, or this bottom coat, you really don't have to spend a lot of time making it look perfect. In fact, this whole project, it's a great way if you don't feel comfortable painting. It's kind of a great way to get your hands wet with painting, because the grungy, worn out look is just part of the style of this. So it doesn't have to be perfect. So if you feel like your painting's not perfect, this is the project for you. It is kind of a messy project, I might say, by the time we get done, but it's kind of fun. The techniques in this project are fun, and I had a lot of fun designing this piece and making it. Okay, went around the edges. Now, like I said, this part right here, I'm going to try and not get too much paint into the slots. If I do, you can take your brush and just kind of, you know, wipe the paint out with your paintbrush. Typically, I will, on most of my pieces, try to paint in one direction. Like I'll go all the way back and forth this way, I'll go up and down that way, but I try to keep my brush strokes even, or I make long brush strokes as I paint, just so my painting is a little bit nicer. But like I said, for this, it doesn't really matter. You do want to protect your paint surface or underneath your paint with something to protect your tabletop. I just use I use my packaging paper from all of my shipping, so it works great, just like butcher block paper or, you know, something like that. Alright, so there is my finished frame, my outer frame. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside to let it dry. Okay, so now we are going to go on to step 2, and this is the background of the board. So I'm going to explain it a little bit, because this step you kind of have to work a little quickly, because we are going to use wood stain. This is, any wood stain will work. This is Early American Color by Varathane. I've tried other wood stains and they work just as well. But like I said, you have to work quickly. I'm going to use a foam brush to put the stain on, and then I am going to go right in after the stain, and I'm just going to shake up my paint a little bit here. I'm using the Wicker White paint by Polka. I've also used, if you like to use some of the chalk paints, I do really enjoy using this mud paint. This is just Simply White. They have different kinds of white, but this Simply White, it covers really well if you're trying to paint with just like straight white and you want real good coverage. This mud, it's by Mud Paint, and this one is called Simply White, and it works really, really well. It's kind of a thick paint, and it leaves a chalky finish, and it sands really well when you want to distress something. But for this, I'm just going to use some white folk art acrylic paint that we get from the hobby store, that I got from Hobby Lobby. So when you do this, you are going to want to put down with a foam brush. You can use any brush, but I use a foam brush just so I can toss it away. You're going to want to put a real heavy coat, and you don't want it to sink into the wood too quickly. You want it to kind of sit on top of the board. So you do want to use a lot. I already shook this can of stain up so that it was well mixed already, and then I'm going to paint the whole entire surface, give it a real kind of a thick coat, and then I'm going to go right back in, and I'm going to paint this white over the top of the stain. And then we are going to take, or I'm going to take this trowel, or I don't know what you call this thing, putty knife, and I'm going to run it across the wood, and it's going to create a wood effect, like a wood grain effect. And you really are going to try and go from one end to the next without stopping, and then not try to go over the top of it, because if you go over the top of it, then you kind of work out those wood grains. So I'm just gonna go ahead and we're gonna try this. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna just really put a heavy coat of stain on here. You can see how it's just kind of puddled up. Now these slats that you see, the little lines, they're going to look like, once you get the overlay of the frame, it's going to look like boards, single boards. So they're just kind of faux little shiplap boards is what it's going to look like. Okay, and if you do find that your stain is drying in some places, you can just add a little bit more stain in those areas. Hopefully you can see that, you know, I'm putting a really heavy coat of this stain on. I'm kind of going over in some places. I'm kind of leaving it thick. So like I said, you want to work kind of quickly because, you know, stain just kind of soaks into your wood pretty quickly. All right, and this is messy. You want to definitely have your surface covered, and you definitely want so now I'm going to go in and I'm going to paint this white paint over the top. And I'm just slapping it on. You're going to use up quite a bit of paint, okay? It's kind of looking like chocolate syrup at the moment. So the paint and the varnish kind of separate a little bit. And like I said, you make a muddy mess. So you do want to have some paper towels nearby when you start to take this off with the trowel or the putty knife over here. Okay, I think that's going to be good. Hopefully. All right, so I've got some paper towels here. So like I said, I'm going to take this and in one stroke, I'm going to go all the way down the board. Start at the top and go all the way down the board. And I'm going to wipe it off, okay? And then go to the top again and down the board. Just like that. And you don't have to worry too much about around the edges here, because that's where your top part of your frame is going to go around. So the edges are going to be covered for you. And then I am going to clean up. Whoops, I just stuck my hand in all of that. See? Trial and error. Let's go over that just a little bit. Now see how that changed that area right there? But it's just kind of giving it a rustic, real rustic effect. So, and so this is the whole step to that. And then where those little lines are, I'm going to take something pointy. So like this is an X-Acto knife I have. You can use a Q-tip, not a Q-tip, a toothpick, and run it down these lines so that you can, if you get paint or anything in them and you want them to be a little thicker, you can run something down there and get the paint out of those lines, so they're a little bit more pronounced. A needle, you know, like if you're a cross stitcher out there, you can use a needle to run down the lines of these. So they're, you know, you just want to get the paint out of it so they show a little bit more. Or if you like them filled in, you can leave it that way too, but I want them more pronounced. So I'm just kind of getting out the excess paint. All right, So that's the background of, doesn't that look cool? Super easy, super quick, kind of messy, right? But it's fun. So I am going to clean up the mess here. I'm going to set this aside to dry, and I'm going to give myself a new painting surface so that we can go on to the next step, which is also kind of messy and fun. So stay tuned, okay? All right, we are back with a clean work surface, and we're going to get started on painting the white frame and cross pieces to the barn door. You can use any color you want. Maybe you don't want your barn doors to be white, but you do want your underneath color to be darker than your top color. But I'm going to be painting mine white, like a distressed white. So I'm using Americana warm white. A regular white will also work. And what we are going to be doing to get that chippy look, there's many ways to do it, but I am going to use this Morton's sea salt. Now, I've been told that you can use Epsom salts. I've never tried it. There are other ways to get this same technique. There's a product called Salt Wash out there, but this one works for me. It's worked in the past for me, so this is what I'm using. And I've already poured into a little cup here I poured it halfway. And then I'm going to add some of this coarse sea salt right to the little container here. And it's probably about 1 parts to 3 parts. So probably 3 parts of paint to 1 part salt. So like 1/3. And the more salt you put in it, the more, I guess, you're going to get that chippy look. But I'm also going to be using this, this chippy brush here. So the brush itself will also give kind of that distressed look. So it looks kind of like this. It kind of looks like a paste. I think I'm going to add a little bit more paint though. And along the way, if it gets thick on you, you can add more paint if you wish. It's just kind of trial and error here, kind of like what your taste is or what your like is. Yeah, so I'm kind of mixing it up here, and then we're going to take the chippy brush and we're going to paint it directly onto our wood. Okay, and I'm just mixing it up with a little popsicle stick here, and I'm just going to start painting it on. Like I said, it is a little thick, and you can quickly brush it on, and the more salt you leave on it, the more chippy it's gonna look. And I am kind of dry brushing a little bit on, and I am going to leave some spots bare with the brown kind of showing through, because I do want that kind of distressed look about the frame. And you do want to go down the sides too, and you don't have to be too precise with it. You can leave some of the dark brown showing through. Now you do want to be careful around these slots, because you want your shelf to be able to go into that. So you want to try and not get too much salt in those areas. Because as you can see, can you see any of the salt that I've got on here? That's just kind of laying on top. And we're going to go back with our putty knife, and we're going to remove that salt off of the wood. As you can see, my brush is kind of leaving like the that wood grain kind of distressed look. Like I said, get around your sides, because you're going to not want those. You're going to want those to be painted white as well. You're not going to want them to be brown. Let me see, get down here. Okay. And if it's easier for you, you can paint the sides first as well. I'm not putting too much salt on the edges, just because I really just didn't feel that it needs it. If salt gets on it, that's fine. You're just gonna take it off and sand it away. We are going to use sandpaper on this to, after we let it dry. You're going to want to let this fully dry before you go on to the next step. I have seen where some people, now my salt is getting a little thick here, so I'm going to add a little bit more paint. I have seen some people add like a modeling or like the depth, I don't know what it's called, like a modeling paste, and I've also seen them use plaster of Paris to this as well. But the other sample I didn't use it, so I just thought, well, I'm just going to use the salt, see how it comes out, and it came out pretty good, so I'm just using salt. And if you have a palm sander, you can easily take a palm sander to this as well, instead of heavy duty sandpaper. Or I guess I shouldn't say heavy duty, probably a heavier grit, I want to say. Okay, I've gone around all my edges on the sides. Oops, I guess I missed this side. And once again, as you can see, this is another messy project, or messy step. Okay, I think I got it to where I like it, and maybe you can see in there that all the little salt crystals. Okay, I'm going to set that one aside, and I'm going to go on to these other pieces that I have. And it goes pretty quickly. As you can see, I'm getting through all the pieces pretty quickly. Now you can, if you want different colors added in, you can also add different colors. Like I just painted brown underneath, but you can add other colors in if you want, like to add some yellow or turquoise, or if you're working with fall colors, you can add a bunch of different colors. I just stuck with the brown, but as you mix different colors for a base coat, you can, once you start sanding, those other colors will come through. So it's kind of cool when you have different colors, and it really gives it that chippy look. And this one, I'm just going to go around the outside edge just a little bit. I don't want too much salt on it because the shelf is going to go over the top of this. So we don't want the salt to thicken so that we have too much of a gap when we put our shelf top on. Okay, and this step is done. Now, like I said, you do want to let this coat fully dry before we go on to the next step. You can see the salt crystals in there, and we're going to take our putty knife and we're going to just scrape all those off, and then we're going to sand it, which will give us that real nice distressed look. All right, so I am going to let these dry, and I will be back to sand and show you what the next step is. All right, my pieces are now dry. I've let them dry overnight, and I'm going to get started sanding. Now, you can use a palm sander for sanding if you want to, once you scrape off all of the salt. And but if you don't have one, I use this purple, which I think is a heavier. It's 150 grit, but it feels more coarse than like your regular 150 grit sandpaper that I have here. This feels much coarser. You can go up in size if you want to make it easier. I guess up in size, down in size, whatever the next. I think the lower you go in number is the heavier the grit the sandpaper is. The higher number you go, the smoother the sandpaper will be. So you can go down to 100 grit or something smaller. But this is what I have on hand, so this is what I'm going to use. And first I'm going to take this, and normally I would do this over a trash can, but because I'm on video here, I am just going to make a huge mess on my table here. So you're going to want to scrape off, take your putty knife and just scrape off this salt. And as you scrape off the salt, it's going to remove your paint that's on your wood. Now, it also, where the salt is a little bit heavier, it just kind of leaves some raised paint areas, which gives you that effect that that, like, you know, when something's chippy or something's old, it always has multiple layers of paint on it. So it's just going to give you that aged look that has like worn levels of paint on the, or layers of paint on the wood. Okay, so I'm just scraping it all off, scraping that you have on the sides. Okay, and see how it's taken off some of the paint in some of the areas here. Now you can scrape it even harder if you want to. You can scrape some of the paint off in some of the areas. But that's where the sandpaper comes in. And like I said, if you have a palm sander, it kind of makes it a lot easier. If not, you can use the just the regular sandpaper, and you'll just have to put a little bit more elbow grease into it. Okay, now I'm going to go onto my frame here. I do have a few pieces of salt in my holes here, so I want to be sure to get those out. Okay, so you can see where I've scraped harder in some of the areas, and it's now taken off some of the paint here. Alright, so now I'm going to take my, I think I've got all my pieces done. I did go ahead and I took off some of the paint, and I sanded a few of the pieces that you see here before I did the others, just to make the video a little bit shorter. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sand it. And like I said, normally I would probably do this outside or over a trash can, but for this purposes, I'm just sanding on my table here. But it's going to make a big, huge mess, so you do want to have a covered work surface. Okay, let me do this side, and then I think I'm going to get my palm sander, so just so you can see what that looks like, show you the difference. You can also use sanding blocks like this if you want. Now, so this side here, and like I said, I don't know if you can see in the video here, where you can see where the different layers of paint on here are kind of built up, and it just looks like it's aged layers of paint. So let me grab my hand sander. All right, I got my little palm sander here, so I'm going to do this side with the palm sander, and it's going to go much quicker. There we go. So you can see how it takes off a lot more areas of your wood surface with the palm sander. And like I said, I would probably not, it's what I have on hand, it's 150 grit, but I would probably go down to a lower grit so that it's easier to sand. Okay? Oh, I guess I could have done this one too. And this one. Let's see. I'll do this one with the palm sander. And as you can see, I probably took off a little bit more area than I wanted to right here. You can just add some paint back in on that when you grab some more paint and just go in and fill it in a little bit. And if I want to, I can take a little bit more off of some of the areas. I can go in and hand sand it again. I'll do this one by hand. You definitely have more control using a piece of sandpaper than with a palm sander. Because your palm sander tends to take off more surface area. So if you want to be careful of that, then I would just use sandpaper. All right, there we go. All right, I am back again, and we are on the last step before we assemble the entire piece together. So the last step is doing the little hardware pieces, and depending upon what look you want, you can use different colors. So let me find the other pieces that I've done here. So these pieces here, I did like a rusty color, and this technique, if you see how these are done, I used like the raw umber and burnt orange. I added a little of this turquoise green lagoon from Americana, and you can even use some of these metallic this one's antique bronze. I do have one here called antique copper, so they have a metallic look. And I actually used, for this one, I used Mod Podge glue and cinnamon, and because it's got that rusty color, and I dabbed some of it on, and then you heat it with your glue gun like this, and it kind of bubbles up. So that's one technique to use if you want them to get that old rusty look. And then another one that I had done, these were done with kind of like a wrought iron black, and so I just took a lot of the same types of colors, a metallic silver, also the turquoise again, and some of the browns, and that's what I got for these colors. So, and then this one I also used the Mod Podge, but I didn't add anything to it, and it did kind of bubble up. But since then I've been trying different products, and the one I'm going to show you right now, I used the Distress Texture Paste. It's opaque, and it's by Ranger Ink, and it works great. So what I did was, I've already done a few here, and I just took my palette knife, and I'm going to do it on this one. I've already done these three. Oh, and to back up a second, you have two pieces. This is the handle, and there are two pieces, and you're going to want to glue these two pieces together to make the handle one individual piece, and then let that dry. Okay, and then I went ahead and already put the distress or the texture paste on these pieces that you see here. I'm going to show you how to do it on this one. Now you can either use like a little palette knife like I have here, and you can just take it and rub some of that texture paste in different little spots, or you can use a stippling brush like this, or a stenciling brush, and you can take it and get some on your brush and then just kind of dab it on here and there. It's kind of a thick paste, but it goes on really easily, and you can kind of pounce it on too, depending upon what type of look you want. You don't want to cover the entire surface, because you want to make it look like, you know, all that build up over the years onto the metal. So that's what this looks like. And then you're just going to let it dry. You want it to be fully dry. I'm going to wash this out, my brush, because you want your stencil brush to be fully dry when you go to the next step. You don't want it to be wet. So I'm going to get as much water as I can out of this little brush. You also do have two pieces that we provided for you. These are 4 pieces. Now if you want to hang your piece, you can use regular hardware from the hardware store, but we did include these pieces for you, which you're going to want to glue the front to the back. This will be the front piece. This is the back spacer, so that your screw is away from the wall. Now you can glue these onto the back of your frame and then hang it on a wall. Okay, so that's what these pieces are for, but other regular hardware will also work. So, and you don't even need to paint those or anything. So I'm going to test my, this paste dries pretty quickly, but I think I'm going to take my heat gun to it to try and speed things up here. All right, I think they're pretty dry, and let's see. So I did go ahead and I painted it with the raw umber, the base color that I was using. I painted it with raw umber first, and so I am just going to put out a few little drops of paint. I'm at the bottom of my bottle there on that. I've got raw umber, charcoal, and these are all kind of just however you want to make it. Maybe some of the orange, I don't know. I'm just putting out some colors I think I might want to use. I am going to use the antique bronze. Always give your paints a good shake, probably especially with these metallics. And maybe a little bit of turquoise, I don't know. Let's see. All right, so we're going to start by dabbing our brush into a little bit of the brown. You don't want a lot of paint. You want to pounce some of it off on your paper towel or whatever you have nearby. And you're just going to start pouncing the color onto your metal piece. Add in some gray and cover in different areas. Not always in the same spot. So you're just adding maybe a little bit of orange here and there. I don't know. Like I said, it's kind of your preference. And I'm just using the same brush, dipping into different spots and adding different colors. Okay? So if you don't like that orange or you don't like what you've done, you can always go back and cover it up with another color. I'm kind of going for a darker color of the base color of the raw umber here. So I can even go back over the top with more raw umber. Gives a really cool texture. Now I'm going to go in with a little bit of that bronze to kind of give it a little bit of that sparkle that metal has. And because that texture paste is on there, it's just going to give you that really cool effect, like it's just aged metal. Hopefully you can see that in there. Hopefully it focuses. Okay, and then you can do all of your other pieces. Like I said, go back. Now you can do all these pieces all at the same time or work with one at a time, depending if you want to, you know, figure out what colors are working and what colors aren't. Super quick. Super easy. That one's already done. Put in a little bit of gray. Maybe I'll add in a little turquoise on this one. There we go. Okay, and then you can see all the different colors in there. All right, and some bronze. You can even go more silver if you want. It's all to your preference. Okay, and even the handle. It really gives the handle a really cool look with the texture paste on it. Kind of blends the two pieces of wood together. I didn't worry too much about the underneath side because it really doesn't show. I just mostly focused on the sides and the top. And just keep pouncing color till you get whatever look you want. There's no right or wrong. It's all in what you like. I'll add in some of the bronze here. Now I would probably do the sides and the top on this a little bit in sections so that I'm not making a mess by, you know, overlapping the wet spots. But it's working. Okay, now hopefully you can see that handle. See how old and aged that handle looks? Super cool effect and really easy to do. Here's some of these that are now dry. Okay. All right. We're going to set these aside and let them dry a little bit. I'll put that brush away so I can wash it. Now, one of the things that, before I go on to the next step, one of the things I noticed when I was doing this, the other pieces. Now, I let this piece dry overnight, and which is fine. You can let it dry overnight. But I did find that letting it dry overnight, the salt and the paint really hardened well. So it was a little bit harder when I went to use my putty knife to scrape off the salt, and it does take it a little bit further down onto the wood, and so a lot of the paint goes all the way down. It removes the paint down to the bare wood again. Now I did try a little sample where this one is the first one where I let it dry overnight. This is a little sample that I made. It's part of the shelf, and this one I let it fully dry, but as soon as it was dry to the touch, I took my putty knife and took off the salt, and it was much easier to remove the salt, and it didn't take it quite as down to the bare wood. So that's just, you know, whatever your preference is on your liking as to what you like the look to be. It's just options for you. Okay, so I just thought I would let you know that. And you know, like I said, I always say nothing is my way is not always the right way. It's just whatever way you like and what works best for you. So try different options. So I'm gonna set these little pieces aside here, and I am going to work on putting this frame together. Now again, even with this, I got some little salt in here, so I did have to take my little nail file here, and I had to sand this slot a little bit to make sure that my shelf, this little shelf piece, fit in the slots. So again, you want to be careful with how much paint you get in those slots. And I did go around, because my base piece was all of the stain and white paint that we did the first coat, or the first step. And so I went back and I added some white paint on all of the sides of that as well. And as you can see, I just slapped it on, leaving some of the darkness showing through. I even had drips of paint on the side of the wood from when we took the paint off, or when I took the paint off the top, and it kind of went down the side of the wood. I left that because I thought it added character, and I liked the way it looked. It made it even look more aged, so I just left all that there. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use this Titebond Quick and Thick. And you do want to make sure that your piece, since you've done all that sanding and everything, you do want to make sure that your piece is definitely wiped off and doesn't have any sawdust, or sawdust all over it. Okay, so I'm going to be using Titebond Quick and Thick, and I'm going to go all the way around the outside edges. I'm going to start with this frame piece first. Okay, and I'm just going to squirt it on. You can paint on the glue if you want. Sometimes I do, but most of the time I just do it this way. I think it works just fine. I also like to use Aleene's tacky glue, but for this it sets up pretty quickly, and that's what, with the bigger pieces, I do like my piece to set up pretty quick, so the tight bond works great. You do want to cover your entire piece though. You don't want any spots that you don't have glue on. Now with larger pieces, sometimes they want to pull apart as they dry. I use the small clips in order to hold it in place. All right, so I'm going to flip this over. Now, one of the things you want to check on is wherever, you know, like I've got heavier paint right here, and just depending upon the look, kind of keep in mind where you're putting your frame as to, you know, where you want those heavier distressed areas, or whichever, you know, whichever look you want. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push this down onto the frame. And just for a few minutes, I am going to add my little clips here. You can use clothespins. I use clothespins, but I also have these tiny clips, those black clips that you can get at your Staples or, you know, office supply store. You can use those as well. This is actually staying down pretty good. But I still think I'm going to put some clamps. Now, when you do clamp things, you want to make sure that it doesn't move on you, because once in a while, when you put these clamps on, it wants to pull the two pieces that you have, kind of shift them. So you want to make sure that they stay nice and even. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to leave those on for a few minutes. But that is the first step to getting the background on. Okay, and then we are going to put these pieces on. Now make sure that you fit it in there. Make sure you have the pieces going the right direction. So when you first start your piece, it's helpful to lay out your pieces so that you know that you have the front sides on all of your pieces and not working from like the back side. Otherwise, it's gonna be wrong when you go to glue it together. Now, I do have a little bit of paint in my corner over here, which is making my corner not want to fit quite right. Or sometimes you even have to make sure that you've got the top and the bottom fitted just so. Okay, so that fits better. Definitely. All right, so I'm going to put this piece in first. So this is why I say it's a little bit easier to lay out your pieces so that you know which piece is going to go where, and that it's all going to fit properly, and that you're not painting the back side of the wood instead of the front side. You're going to get all done and then realize, oops, I painted the back side of the wood, not the front side. So laying out the pieces is quite helpful. I'm guilty of it myself sometimes when I realize I didn't paint the correct side. All right, so give that a good press. Make sure it's all stuck down. Then this one. All right, and then this one. Okay, press them down really good. All right, so your two longer pegs go in first, and then your two smaller pegs are going to want to go into here. Okay, so what I did was I added some glue in the background here into the slot, and even these tinier slots. Okay, just put a little dab of glue in there. That way when you put your shelf in and then slide your shelf in, okay, like so, and give it a good press down. All right, so it looks like this, and then I can take this off probably. My sides are probably all dry. Like I said, the glue sets up pretty quickly, so. All right, so my shelf is on, and then this is our shelf overlay, because I never like to see any of these little slots. I like those to be covered. So I designed the piece so that it would have a little covering on top of the shelf so that you won't see that. I guess once you put stuff on it you wouldn't see it, but I just like to cover them up. So I added some glue, and then we are going to put this right on the top there. Let's get it centered, and it's going to go all the way to the back. Okay, and again, give it a good press down. Now, like I said, if you have any salt in the way, or you know, you want your underneath side to not, you don't want to have any gaps along these edges here, so make sure that it's all clean of any thick paint or salt. Okay, all right, so it's all put together. It was that easy to put together. Okay, I'm going to let that all dry a little bit. In the meantime, let's go back and check these pieces. I think they look pretty good, and I think they're going to go great with the background there. So your handle's going to get glued here. These two little pieces are the top and bottom of your, and I pretty much put it maybe just a little slightly, up to your preference, but I put it a little bit slightly off center toward the top more. And then this one's going to go up here, and this one's going to go down here. All right, and there you have it. It's all done. Like I said, this was a messy project, but it's certainly a fun project, and such a cute little shelf to put your little trinkets and treasures on, your cross-stitch pillows, whatever you have. I even hung a banner from it one month. Really fun project. And like I said, it's easy painting. You don't have to be precise. It's all messy, so if you're not a perfect painter, this is a great project for you. So if you have any questions, you can leave me a comment in the box below, or you can message me at info@Paisleys and Polka Dots, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. And if you liked this video, please like and subscribe. And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.